This is Fresh Air. I'm Terry Gross. My guest, Paul Thomas Anderson, wrote and directed several films I love: Heart 8, Boogie Nights, Magnolia, and There Will Be Blood. And now he has a new film to add to that list, The Master. New York Times film critic A.O. Scott described it as imposing, confounding, and altogether amazing. The film won top awards at the Venice Film Festival and had its North American premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival. The Master is mostly set in 1950, after a World War II veteran, Freddie Quell, played by Joaquin Phoenix, returns to America. Quell is mentally unstable and having a hard time fitting in anywhere. He stumbles onto a party being held by a cult-like group called The Cause and is taken in by them. Their leader is the charismatic Lancaster Dodd, played by Philip Seymour Hoffman. His wife, Peggy Dodd, played by Amy Adams, is suspicious of Quell and afraid he'll be a disruptive force. But Lancaster Dodd welcomes the challenge of taming Freddie's animal instincts. Let's start with a scene from The Master. The members of The Cause are at a party where a skeptic challenges some of Lancaster Dodd's teachings, like his claims about reincarnation and how he can lead followers through their past lives through a technique he calls processing.
I still find it difficult to see the proof with regards to past lives that your movement claims.
Would you care to submit yourself to processing? Look through the telescope, as my friend said.
Well, perhaps another time. You've also said that these cause methods, can cure leukemia, according to your book. And
some forms of leukemia. In being able to access past lives, we are able to treat illnesses that may have started back thousands, even trillions of years.
Trillions?
With a T, sir.
The Earth is not understood to be more than a few billion years old.
Well, even the smartest of our current scientists can be fooled. Yes?
You can understand skepticism.
Yes,
can you not?
yes. For without it, we'd be positives and no negatives. Therefore, zero charge. We must have it.
Good science, by definition, allows for more than one opinion, doesn't it?
Which is why our gathering of data is so far-reaching.
Otherwise, you merely have the will of one man, which is the basis of cult. Is it not?
Tis. And thankfully, we are, all of us, working at breakneck speeds and in unison towards capturing the mind's fatal flaws and correcting it back to its inherent state of perfect. Whilst righting civilization and eliminating war and poverty, and therefore the atomic threat.
Well, I find it quite difficult to comprehend, or more to the point, believe that you believe, sir, that time travel hypnosis therapy can bring world peace and cure cancer.
I have never been to the pyramids. Have you?
No.
And yet we know that they are there. Because learned men have told us so. May I ask, what is your name?
John Moore.
Mr. Moore, if I may. Is there something frightening to you about the Cause's travels into the past?
Frightening?
Yes.
No.
What scares you so much about traveling into the past, sir?
I'm not
Are
frightened.
you afraid that we might discover that our past has been reshapen, perverted, and perhaps what we think we know of this world is false information?
Paul Thomas Anderson, welcome to Fresh Air. Congratulations on The Master. It's such a fine film.
Thanks, Terry.
I think that whole idea of former lives is so appealing to some people, the belief that this is one of many incarnations that they have experienced and that they will experience. Did you think a lot about why the idea of reincarnation and former lives is so appealing to people who believe in it?
Yeah, but not a lot, because it's a pretty simple one, I think. It's just because it's incredibly hopeful. You know, it says that when you're dead, you're not dead. And that's something I can get behind, you know. I mean, I don't want to get into philosophy here, Terry, but, you know, it's a very optimistic thing.
So you were in the position for this movie of, you know, creating a cult or an alternative community, an alternative belief system, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And did you do like a lot of, you know, reading or research to see what real groups like that were like, not to copy them, but just to get an idea of some of the basic principles? Or
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a lot that's been made out of, you know, the kind of beginning point for what we're modeling off of was Dianetics, the early days of Dianetics, 1950. Kind of a lot of similarities to that, you know.
And that was created by L. Ron Hubbard, who
That's right.
later founded Scientology.
That's right. You know, I'd come across these old newsletters called Abery, which is made by the Hart couple down in Arizona, and it was kind of like the best way to inhabit, to try to get to know the people that might have been interested in anything from handwriting analysis to yoga to new diets to past lives therapy. You know, this couple, the Harts, were into it all. You know, and they wrote this newsletter that actually went from like around 1951, 52 to like the mid 60s. And I kind of poured through most of them as much as I could, and found it the best way to try to hold hands with the past and kind of get to know these people and what their feelings were, what the kind of ins and outs were amongst these groups.
Can you give a couple of examples of things that you learned from them about beliefs or the kinds of people who subscribe to this newsletter?
Well, there was a variety of people. I mean, really, like a kind of crazy variety. Like if you'd been a sort of census taker, you'd be probably baffled by the wide variety. I mean, I think the most thing in common is they're all white, but rich and poor. Some people coming back from the war. Newly divorced women at the time in the sort of early 50s, a few of those. A lot of engineers, men who were into science fiction or fantasy. People who were just sort of forward thinkers. People that had made their way down to Arizona. You know, I know a couple people talked to friends of mine whose parents migrated down to Arizona in the early 50s, which you got to think about that. You know, you're probably coming from the Midwest or the East, and there's going to be this freezing cold. You know, they just want to get out of there, and you're kind of getting down to this kind of barren place where you're probably in search of some spirituality or some other kind of ways of thinking and living. There was a kind of wide open feeling to a lot of the things that I was reading, and a lot of investigation and an openness to anything, which felt like kind of a pre-hippie thinking.
So you had to create a series of exercises, processing as it's called in the film, where people are put through things, they're put through their past lives, they're put through certain exercises to help, kind of get in touch with their better selves, their higher selves. And one of those exercises is just being asked a question and then having to repeat the answer over and over again. So, like, say your name, say it again, say it again. Are you thoughtless in your remarks? Mm-hmm. Do you linger at bus stations for pleasure? Do your past failures bother you? Do your past failures bother you? How did you come up with that as something that, the leader of this group would put new people through as an almost initiation process into the group?
Well, it's inspired by the actual questionnaire that's out there as it relates to Scientology, but I sort of changed it and switched it around. And I kind of came to that many, many years ago and actually found it was a great way to just sort of start writing, forgetting any implications of making a film or a story about this. It was really just like kind of writer's block and sitting around. And sort of the best way for me to start writing stories to get two characters talking to each other. And, you need, if you got questions from one, you're going to have to get answers from the other, and you can kind of start to find out who's coming out of you when you're writing, if you know what I mean. And so I just started doing it as an exercise, and that was probably one of the scenes that I kind of wrote first in the movie, in the middle of the middle, sort of working from the middle. But I wrote that years and years ago. Didn't really know who these people were, so I just started discovering who they were by what their answers would be.
So you started writing a scene that had say your name, say it again, without knowing who was in the scene or where it was headed?
Yeah, but I found out when I was writing it,
Throughout the film, I kept asking myself, what does the Philip Seymour Hoffman character actually believe? To what extent does he really believe he can take people through their past lives? To what extent does he really believe in past lives? How much is he aware that he's making it up as he goes along? Is he delusional? Does he really believe this? And I come up with different answers during different parts of the movie.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think he does. I mean, I have a lot of faith in that character. I really do believe that he is a scientist and he's a writer, and he's actually very open, I think, among certain people about that we are on a journey and we are discovering and we are making this up as we go along. I think when he's comfortable, he does admit that. I don't know what's going on here, but that's the important thing. That's why we're going to roll up our sleeves and do this work and get to the bottom of human existence and get us all back to our inherent state of perfect. I think he's very open about that until he gets put into a corner or is sort of face to face with some kind of skepticism and somebody that wants to say otherwise. And then he probably asserts himself as knowing much more than he does, or that he feels that he does. And I've always felt with this guy that the pressure's on. At a certain point, it's a very difficult position to be in. The more people that are around or following you, the harder it becomes to say, I don't know what's going on. Let's keep discovering. Let's keep that journey going. It's kind of like, you see these films that are big hits, and then they got to go make a sequel. You think, oh boy, got to do it again. It's hard work.
Now, you wrote the part of the master, the cult leader, with Philip Seymour Hoffman in mind. The first time you used him, that you worked with him, was in Boogie Nights, where he's a member of the film crew that's shooting the porn films, and he has a crush on the porn star Dirk Diggler. The Hoffman character is gay, but he's very awkward. He's very uncomfortable. I think he's very uncomfortable in his own body. He comes off as a weak person, and now you've made him into such a kind of strong person. It's interesting that you've seen both sides of him as an actor and seen both capabilities in him.
Well, I know he's my friend, but I have to say there's just nothing he can't do. I feel so lucky to have met Phil and hooked up with him. I can remember, growing up, all I wanted to do was make films. You sort of imagine yourself on the set making movies with a camera and lights, and you sort of imagine as a kid you're going to be sort of, I don't know, making westerns outside. Never in my fantasy did I see anybody that looked like Phil Hoffman being a part of that picture, but here we are, and somewhere along the way I found this actor who I just think can do anything, and is capable of so much that you can throw anything at him.
One of the things he does in the film is blush, and it's so interesting when he blushes. Like, he plays a character who's obviously a kind of narcissistic character. He kind of loves himself and believes in himself. And there's times when he's blushing, when he's talking to his followers in this cult, where it's almost like he's thinking to himself, gosh, it's just so embarrassing to be this wise and this sensitive. And I don't know, as an actor, like, how do you control when you blush? I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, I don't know if you can, but I wouldn't put it past Phil for being able to control when he can blush. Some of these actors have skills with their body and their faces and their words, and that is kind of beyond comprehension. It's wild.
Would you watch him and think, oh, God, you're blushing at exactly the right moment?
I don't know which part. I think that whether he can blush or not is really just. I think what you said more directly is that kind of great thing that this character does. His kind of joy in his intelligence, his joy in discovery, his humility. I think Phil's playing that. Somebody who's so good with words, who loves words, who absolutely never met a word that he didn't like or couldn't use, or kind of flip it around like a pancake.
So the Philip Seymour Hoffman character is kind of corpulent and full of life and so social that he has followers, whereas the Joaquin Phoenix character is kind of wizened. He's survived World War II, but he's certainly not mentally intact. We don't know how he went into the war, but he certainly didn't come out of it very well. His spine is twisted and his posture almost bizarre. And he holds his hands on his hips with his shoulders pulled, like coming forward, right. And he's all bent over. Is almost like a physical expression of his inner anguish and dislocation, things that he doesn't have the words to express.